everybody. Welcome back to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Smart YouTube channel. I am your host, Dr. Karen Litzy, physical therapist with a practice in New York City, and also the founder and creator of the Strictly Business Blueprint. So in today's episode, we are talking about gut health. So I know that's a buzzword and a lot of people talk about gut health, but in this episode, I am joined by Dr. Chris Damon, Chief Medical and Scientific Officer at UR Labs, and Mark Washington, the founder and CEO of SuperGuts. These are two guys who are well-versed and well-trained in everything gut-related. We discuss gut health and why it's essential for overall health. They explain that the gut is not just about digestion, but a portal to whole health. They also discuss what we eat and breathe can affect our gut and body health. The episode highlights the importance of understanding gut health and how healthcare professionals should incorporate this information into patient care. So a little bit more about each of my guests. Dr. Chris Damon is the Chief Medical and Scientific Officer at UR Labs. Prior to joining UR Labs, he was initiative lead of gut health in the enteric and diarrheal diseases team at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He holds an MD from Columbia University and MA in molecular biology and biochemistry from Wesleyan University. He moved west to complete his residency in internal medicine and fellowship in gastroenterology at the University of Washington. Chris continued on at the University of Washington with a joint appointment in the Division of Gastroenterology and the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. He maintains an academic appointment with the University of Washington with research interests focused on investigating the role of diet and microbiome-directed therapies as treatments for inflammatory bowel disease. Past research activities have included early drug discovery work at Pfizer's Discovery Technology Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and epidemiological surveillance work categorizing Plasmodium drug resistance genes at the Armed Forces Research Institute of Medical Sciences in Bangkok, Thailand. Like I said, these are people who are well-versed in the gut. Mark Washington is the founder and CEO of SuperGut. His background spans a wide variety of consumer health businesses, including serving as the CEO of Irwin Naturals, a 100 million plus supplements company and leading producer of soft gel herbal formulas sold in over 90,000 retail outlets. President and CEO of Beachbody, a $1 billion plus nutrition and fitness company with products including Shakeology Health Shakes, P90X, and the Beachbody On Demand digital platform. And working 9 years at the wonderful company, a $4 billion agricultural and food and beverage holding company, where he served in a variety of roles, including CFO, EVP of Sales, and Director of Strategy and Operations. Mark deep experience in the wellness industry, also some personal experiences, which we talk about in the podcast, inspired him to found SuperGut to help people regain control of their health by harnessing the power of science of the gut biome. Mark holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a BS from Princeton. So you guys, these are people who really know the gut. They know what they're doing. This was a great episode. I feel like I learned so much. I was taking so many notes. So have a notebook ready. Have your computer ready. If you're listening on the go, make a mental note to go back and check out all of the links. Everything will be in the notes below. So again, don't forget to, and of course, don't forget to like and hit the notification bell and all that kind of stuff so that you don't miss an episode of the Healthy, Wealthy, and Smart podcast right here on YouTube. Hi, Dr. Damon and Mark. Welcome to the podcast. I'm happy to have you guys on to talk all things gut health, which is something that I know as a physical therapist, we are, as a profession, becoming more and more interested in how we can weave in gut health for our patients for a whole host of benefits. So thank you so much for coming on.
Cool. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah,
pleasure, Karen.
I am really excited. So let's just dive right in. So when we talk about gut health, most people just think it has to do with digestion, but that might not be the case. So I'll have either one of you can start off, kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, happy to take a go at that, Karen. So I might be just a little bit partial because I'm a gastroenterologist. So you might be asking the right person, the wrong person here, depending on your perspective. But I tend to be a glass half full type. And I would say in some ways, we can think of gut health as a portal to whole health. And in some ways that's very true, because this adage that you are what you eat, and the gut is the center of disease and truly the center of health as well. These aren't just aphorisms. This is actually true. And literally I think it's 7 years, every molecule in our body is replaced, literally. So who you are today, 7 years ago, 7 years in the future, just by matter and the molecules, completely different. And where do all those molecules come from? Well, the air we breathe and what we eat through our gut. So just going through that little thought experiment says, well, the gut has to have something to do with our overall health. Now, you can make it as simple and as complex as you want to, and we can talk about the deep pathways and literally the superhighways that are two directional that connect the gut to the rest of the body, like the brain, the immune system, our endocrine system. And we can dive into that. But I always like to start simple. And I find those analogies so compelling. And again, caveat that I'm a gastroenterologist. Maybe I'll pass the baton over to Mark, because
so
he
for
might be less
for the non-gastroenterologists, we're singing from the same playbook, though. Like, I mean, and this is obviously where Chris and I intersect, and why we get along so much, is just this fundamental belief in understanding of the impact of your gut health on total health, right? And that's, and the ability for you to actually do something about it through the food you eat, as well as, what you're doing in your life. Like what Chris said, it is bi-directional. Like, from my standpoint, I was thinking of this because I come from the health and wellness space of how can we help impact overall health and like really play a role in combating some of these unbelievably epidemic chronic conditions that we are dealing with, obesity and diabetes and blood pressure and cholesterol, et cetera. And it's really fascinating when I was indoctrinated into the science of the gut, which I'd say is about 5 years ago. So I don't go as deep as Chris in this space. It was literally mind blowing. I would say before I was gut aware, right? I knew of probiotics and good for digestion and regularity and so forth, right? But it was mind blowing to understand just how pervasive of an impact the health of your gut, your digestive tract, is, not just on digestion, but in all of these different conditions in your body, including many of those that I wanted to do something about. Like, cardiometabolic health is kind of a big part of my focus, and just such a connection and a tie to the way that your body, regulates insulin control and blood sugar levels and appetite control and weight and cardiovascular health. So I was mind blown. And then you learn more about the connections that go beyond metabolic health into the gut brain axis and, mental health as well. And so it truly is, in so many ways, your foundation for total health. Digestion, absolutely. Let's call it the first stop and the first indicator. But it's so fascinating just how pervasive and how broad gut health and the impact that it does have on total health.
And if we can kind of tease some of those tracks out, one being the immune system. So oftentimes from an immune standpoint, I start thinking about inflammatory markers and things like that. So how does your gut health, what is the two-way street for the gut health and the immune system?
Yes, and I love how you put it in terms of tracks, because I would say there's maybe 3 main tracks or modes of communication. The immune system is certainly one of them. So that's the immune cells and all of the cytokines that they make. The other main track would be the nervous system and neurotransmitters. And then the last one would be the endocrine system and the hormones. And in some ways, the gut is the other brain. It's the other endocrine organ, and it's the other immune system, because there truly are as many, if not more, neurons, immune cells, and endocrine cells in the gut as there are in the rest of the body. But in terms of the connection between the gut and the immune system specifically, how does that work? Well, when we're first born, the gut plays a really, really important role in educating the immune system and telling our body what is friendly and unfriendly. So all of the healthy microbes in our gut, we have to learn that those are friends. the food that we eat, we also have to learn that that is friendly. And the gut produces short chain fatty acids like butyrate, acetate, propionate, and those in a very real way train the immune system, that T regulatory cells, to recognize these antigens as friend. So that's an example of how the gut is playing a role, not just in training the immune system in the gut, but really kind of the entire body. But the reverse is true as well. So if we have an infection and we have inflammatory cytokines like IL-1, TNF-alpha flowing around in our bloodstream, those in a very real way impact the gut and lead to opening of tight junctions, compromise in that barrier. And a lot of what's present in the gut then becomes more accessible to the immune system, and it becomes this feed-forward inflammatory situation. Some really fascinating work that's just been done on temperature curves, actually, and hospitalization, and how the gut microbiome is contributing to that. And so that's kind of another example, like which way is that going? Is it the temperature and the cytokines that are opening that gut, or is it the gut that's actually contributing to the elevated cytokines and the temperature? And it's probably yes. The answer is yes.
One of the stats that I have seen, and
Yeah.
Chris, you can back me up, just speaking to this connection between the gut and your, immune system and inflammation, is, correct me if I'm wrong, I've heard that 70 to 80% of your immune cells actually reside in your gut. Right. I mean, to give you an indicator of just how pervasive that this connection is. And so when you think about that, it makes sense that your gut would have such an important role in the modulation, right, of, your immune system and of inflammation. And it's one of the things that Chris has really educated me on. It's not, you hear a lot of people talk a lot about boosting immunity, right? I mean, it's really, how do you balance? How do you regulate, kind of keep these systems in check? Like, that's one of the things that Chris told me, more is not always better, right? It's how do you keep these things in balance? And, the gut microbiome playing a big role in that, in kind of immune, regulation, immune system response and regulation, as well as an inflammatory response as well, and making sure those stay well regulated. And the gut's a key role in that. So I appreciate Chris for educating me on that aspect of this conversation.
Yeah, and
I've learned.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Mark, you've taught me probably that much and 10 times more in other areas. So it's mutual.
And when we're looking at it from a real practical standpoint of, well, what do we put into our gut and what shouldn't we put into our gut to help regulate these tracks, right? So, I mean, I think even I know like a whole bunch of processed food and like, snacks and chips and pastries and things like that, like not great. Sugar, basically sugar, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's
not
simple.
Great, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
So how can we educate people on making better choices? And specifically, what can we say instead of just like, well, everyone knows you shouldn't have sugar. Okay. But, sometimes people need a little bit more practical education.
Maybe we can start out simple again, Karen. And I think Michael Pollan has said it well in his book, In Defense of Food. I'll try to get the quote right. I think he said, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. And we could probably end the podcast right there, because that's all you really need to know.
So it doesn't have to be overly complicated, is what you're saying.
It doesn't
You don't
have to be.
You don't have
We
to have the right,
things.
we combination of foods that need to be eaten at a certain time of the day and everything.
Well, so journeys are important, and at the end of a journey, you always ideally end up right back at home. Even in life's metaphorical journey, you end up back home, and yet you're richer for it. And that's how I see unpacking nutrition, and how it ultimately points the finger right back at that statement, but in a profound way, in a way that's compelling, and in a way that is empowering, and perhaps open to innovation that captures some of the profound elements of food. And so I'm not defeatist. I also recognize the value of, detailed research. And this is actually one of the things that Mark and I really identified on and conspired on at the company, and some of the work that we did there with the research.
So one of the things to add on to this is I think we also share this common belief in trying to keep things as simple as possible, understanding the details behind it, but trying to keep things as simple as possible. When you look at the angle of nutrition, I think obviously the old message of eat your veggies, like don't eat sweets, etc. It's all true, but is it that helpful, right? Or practical, right? And so that's what we aim to do, both through like education as well as through our products, is how can we go beyond that and create stuff that's sustainable and healthy. And what I believe is that the gut, and the fact that, okay, so if we are aligned that the gut is important for managing overall health and disease prevention, then let's talk about what's the nutrition angle that impacts the gut. And it basically provides just another lens to help inform some of your nutrition decisions, is how I think about it. It does come back to simple though. Like, what are the things that are bad for your overall health? Like highly processed, high sugar, simple carbs that are, spike your blood sugar. Those are things that are bad for your overall health. Guess what? Those are the things that are bad for your gut health as well, right? Literally like the bad bacteria, I like to call them. Chris has more technical terms, but the bad bacteria in your gut, they feast off of those things that make us unhealthy, all that highly processed, high sugar, high carbs, et cetera. And so it's just another lens on something we already knew. We already knew that these things were bad for you, but it actually is not just bad overall. It's literally bad for your foundation of health, your gut. On the flip side, there are things that we know that are good for you, right? Eat more food, not too much, mostly plants. Guess what? If you follow that, you're going to get a lot of in your diet. You're going to get a lot of fiber in your diet if you actually are following kind of that old simple statement about what do you get in your food. And guess what your gut needs to create a healthy foundation? You need to get more fiber in your diet, and that's really the food for the good bugs in your gut that are responsible for keeping us healthy and producing those short chain fatty acids and butyrate and modulating these systems, et cetera. And so that's obviously a big part of where we focus at Supergut, is how do we make it simple to, one, avoid the carbs and the highly processed stuff, but how do we get more fiber to have this prebiotic effect, right? Feed the good bugs in your gut. That's a big part of what we do with our products. And obviously we do a lot of this education as well. So it really is simple, but now the gut provides a new lens as to how to think about these, nutrition decisions that we're making.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really well put, Mark. And, in terms of those missing things, I think that's where some of the public health messaging has actually been missing the mark. And we really have focused on the bad things, and they're not truly bad. It's just we get too much of them. That's what makes them bad, is that it's just too much, and that's sugar and fat and salt. I think Michael Moss wrote a book by that title. Actually, it's a great read. But it's as much what's been taken out through processing and reintroducing those things. Whole foods will do that. It'll achieve that natural balance. It can be really hard for people to eat enough whole foods, and they're not always the most convenient things, and sometimes expensive. So I'm a pragmatist, and that's where I really start to get excited about, well, let's break it down. What are the things we're missing? And fiber is one of them. There's three other ones, four total. I call them the phonetic Fs. And so fiber, phenols, that's the chi, that's the pH, ferments, and good fats. And if you look at populations that live the longest lives, there's a National Geographic correspondent that has popularized the blue zones where people disproportionately live to about 100 years old. One of the common denominators are these four Fs. There's other things beyond food that are really important in lifestyle. And they capture those, like community and purpose. But among food, those four Fs actually capture the common denominators pretty well. Now, Blue Zones doesn't talk about the four Fs, But it's just another way of thinking about what those common denominators are. They're all really important. Fiber is super important too. They all actually feed the gut microbes. And I think bugs is a great way of saying it, Mark. I say that all the time.
And what about probiotics, kombucha, apple cider vinegar, the little gummies? I think the way that they're marketed, this is just my opinion, so don't at me, but this is just my opinion. But it seems like they're marketed to people as being, if you just do this, you don't have to worry about anything else. Do you know what I mean? Like, just take this apple cider vinegar gummy or have a kombucha or take probiotics and you can kind of just eat whatever you want.
I'll let you start, Chris, because I've got some thoughts. Yeah, for sure.
I have a lot of thoughts, and truly we could take each of those things that you just mentioned and have a whole podcast around them. And this silver bullet approach to health, to nutrition, as you allude to, may not be quite right. It's really a holistic approach, and how some of these approaches fit into the bigger picture. It's not to say that they can't help and contribute.
Right.
And fiber gummies, what type of fiber is in it? And can you tolerate that fiber? A lot of those gummies have inulin. That's a so-called FODMAP, and that's a fiber that might make worse or exacerbate folks that have IBS. So that's important to think about. Not all probiotics are created equal. Not every probiotic that you buy and reads it's there on the label actually has it in the product. Because of the regulatory checks and balances.
They don't have to be regulated like the FDA, like regular medications.
Yeah,
or traditional medications.
That's true.
That is correct.
That's true. I would say even beyond that, like in terms of the mapping between the claims that you will see, for many brands, and we'll just talk probiotics for a second, relative to how much of that has actually been validated, right, with evidence, not just on, in specific scenarios, but like literally with those products in that format, like available over the counter, off the shelf, et cetera. Like, is it actually validated? Do you have evidence that you're going to deliver the benefits that, are being claimed, as a result? And that's where I start to bring out some of the cynicism. Listen, I love the space of health and wellness, but I do think many brands go, a step too far in terms of claiming what this product is going to do for you in your health. And I come back to the science, right? I mean, to really be able to stake some of the claims, actually having an evidence base, like clinical validation to actually prove that you can deliver on that promise, I think is a key missing element that is too missing out there in the space, even within probiotics, let alone when you get into things like apple cider vinegar and kombuchas of the world, et cetera, that don't have a ton of, evidence around true efficacy around gut health and the benefits.
It's a really good point. And as a physician, I always come back to the evidence base. And there are probiotics out there which have been studied for very specific conditions and for which there is evidence. And if I am suggesting a probiotic to a patient, it would always be in the context of that evidence. Similarly, there's been a lot of talk about apple cider vinegar. And is there anything really special about that versus just standard vinegar or acetic acid? And there's actually a ton of research around just acetic acid, and not all of that sort of flocculent material or mother, the sort of dead bacteria that are present in the apple cider vinegar. But the vinegar itself, being bioactive, actually taps into the mechanism of how fiber works too. So fiber is converted by primary degraders, microbes in the gut.
Good bugs.
Largely the lower gut, the good bugs. Thank you, Mark. The commensal organisms that take that fiber and turn it into vinegar, literally, into acetate, acetic acid. And then it's the secondary consumers that take the vinegar and turn it into propionate and butyrate. Butyrate is probably one of the star molecules that the microbes make in order to affect positive health benefits on the immune system, on the neurological system, and on the endocrine system. So, yeah, I think, I tend to keep a very open mind when it comes to some of these alternative practices, especially if an individual or patient is telling me, well, this has worked for me, doc. And then I just look at the literature, and there's often like a 1970s paper that says, well, maybe there's something here. And okay, maybe that's not enough to go out and tell other patients this is worthwhile. But I do think there's a ton of wisdom and tradition. And that's something that, we as practitioners should actually be very open to, ultimately validating through, RCTs would be, important for evidence. But I do think that wisdom is a really nice place to start.
Yeah. And you both sort of talked about fiber and as being very important, and that there are different types of fiber. How many different types of fiber are there? And do we need all of it?
Want me to go, Mark?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So there's a lot of different types of fiber, and it's like anything, it depends on how you define a different type of fiber.
Yeah.
So very small changes. You can kind of categorize fibers maybe into 10 to 20 different major classes. And then there are, tons of subtypes of those classes. In fact, there's a biologist in the University of California system, Carlito Labria, who's absolutely brilliant. And he's created this sort of taxonomy of fibers, UC Davis, I believe. But do you need them all? I think was one of your questions.
No, I definitely don't. Not if there's like 40 of them. Definitely don't need them all.
Yeah.
But I did not know that there were that many different types of fiber. And which then begs the question, like, should you be consulting with a registered dietitian or a physician before you start taking extra fiber, if you're not getting that from your foods and you're getting it from some sort of supplemental product, if you're on medication or you have certain conditions, should people be consulting? Because oftentimes we think, oh, it's over the counter, it's just fiber.
Yeah. I think, number one, it's really important to listen to your body. And with any food, if you feel like your body isn't responding well to it, you have a headache, or your stools are looser, or you're constipated, or you have pain, that all could be connected to the foods that you're eating. So first and foremost, listen to your body. Second, if you have a medical condition, absolutely, it's really important that you talk with your provider. Certainly around medications, but also around supplements and herbs and fiber, because not everyone responds to food and supplements in the same way. And some cases there may be contraindications to taking certain supplements. If you're taking medications, there can be interactions, or if you have certain medical conditions. So 100% yes, always go to your provider. That's actually really good blanket advice.
So want to comment on the overall questions of different types of fiber. The one thing that Chris really honed in on is, not all fiber is created equal. I mean, a lot of times you'll see some, I wouldn't call it necessarily a simplification, but a categorization of these different types broadly into groups. A lot of times you'll see people talk about soluble fiber versus insoluble, and they'll, within that, there's different types of soluble, different types of insoluble. Like the solubles generally means dissolves in water and generally, slows the digestive process. And a lot of, the fibers that we use, some of them are soluble, right? And actually have been shown around some of the cardiometabolic effect of the slow digestion, absorption, and managing stable blood sugar and actually having
Mm.
positive impact on cardiovascular, cholesterol, et cetera. And then you have the insoluble types of fiber, which are also very important, which tend to be more associated, and Chris, correct if I'm wrong, but with some of the digestive benefits, right? Improving regularity and, make sure that your stools are, better, bulkier stools, good poop, right? I mean, so
Mhm.
a lot of times the insoluble fibers and all the different categories fall into those. We actually have a mix of both in what we do, as what I've seen and understand is that it's important to bring some of that diversity because you're actually serving different purposes, actually feeding different bugs that are responsible for different elements of your health. And so that's one of the general themes that we have is that, all fiber is good, right? It's all good. You want to get more in your diet. None of us get enough, right? And trying to get a diverse source of fiber. Obviously, whole foods contribute to this, but this is
Mhm.
also where you can come in with products like ours to help supplement, complement what you're not getting through your whole foods because almost none of us do get enough fiber in our diets from whole foods. And so that's why we try to complement with some diverse sources to get that kind of, again, that solid foundation, serving different functions, feeding different bugs in your gut.
And just one other thing to say that I think is really important for any supplement that someone's taking is whatever you're taking, fiber otherwise, that's meant to be in the context of a food, of a
Right.
whole food. So if you are taking something, it's not so much that it helps with absorption or things like that, but eating it with a meal is likely important for its benefit. And just from the perspective of microbes, in the case of fiber, microbes exist in communities and they consume nutrients in complexity. So those many different inputs are growing the many different bugs, and it's a really complex network on both sides that's evolved over eons. And so when we think about, well, how do we reinvent a processed food if you can do such a thing,
Hmm.
and complement the less good for you processed foods with some of the things that are missing, like adding fiber? I think that's really important. The fiber is going to maybe be most impactful in the setting of consuming it with those foods, and that's actually been shown in some of the experimental work that's been done, where we see that the blood sugar spike that happens after a meal, the so-called
Mhm.
postprandial blood sugar spike or area under the curve, um, if you consume fiber, certain types of fiber, like beta glucan in particular, resistant starch, along with that meal, it will blunt that sugar spike by 30 to 40%. And with that blunt, you also release less insulin. And with insulin, there's this whole cascade of events that
Hmm.
happens biochemically within your body um, in response to that sugar in order to get it down. And chronically over time, really high insulin as a result of really high sugar can take its toll on your pancreas, where that insulin is coming from, can take
Uh-huh.
its toll on the rest of your body, and how that insulin is impacting the body, like the fat cells in the liver. So, um, naturally, whole foods, those carbohydrates come packaged part and parcel with the fiber. And processed foods, it's just simple carbohydrates that's been removed from the fiber. So the next best thing is if you can partner them together, it truly does mitigate that blood sugar spike and insulin response.
Oh, that's so interesting. And then can that sort of insulin spike, or sorry, blood sugar spike and insulin spike, and if that keeps happening over time, is that what leads to type 2 diabetes?
Nobody really truly knows
Mm.
what the cause of type 2 diabetes
Oh,
is,
that's interesting.
uh, but that's one hypothesis. Yeah.
Mhm. Mm.
Yeah. And that's why, like, for those who do have elevated blood sugar levels, right, you do see their profiles, right, in terms of the insulin production, the average blood sugar levels, up until over time. I kind of think of it as, it's just oversimplifying, but you kind of reach your capacity. Like your body has been taxed to the point where it's just no longer able to tell. And that's when, insulin sensitivity has really declined, and that's where your body is not able to produce as much insulin, and that's where your blood sugar levels stay high and continue to climb, right? And so we do know the output of it is the continued process. I think it's been very well studied as those who are dealing with this on a continual basis, and with those who are living with diabetes are experiencing, by definition, like those high blood sugar levels and insulin sensitivity, which becomes very, very chronic condition and very, very difficult to reverse. Like once you're there, like for most people,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that get diagnosed right with diabetes are have the diagnosis for most of, if not the rest of their lives, and are on medication, to manage this, condition through the rest of their lives as well. And you understand like how the whole mind body is connected. When that happens, it tends to not just be diabetes and blood sugar, right? I mean, it tends to ride along with other chronic conditions, whether it's, weight and obesity, or whether it's, chronic inflammation, whether it's digestive issues. Like these things tend to, I've just always been fascinated how so many chronic disease and conditions tend to ride along with each other. So you could see how much this mind body connection and how all of this does have so much impact, going back to nutrition and how it can be connected to so many other things in your body and your life beyond just putting on a few pounds of weight or what have you.
Right. And now let's talk about super gut, right? So you guys gave us such a great education, I think, on certainly on fiber. I didn't know any of that. And gut health. So talk about super gut for a little bit. So why, what's the why behind it?
Yeah, I'll start with that. So I've always been really passionate about helping people live healthier lives. It's kind of why I've charted my path and my career in this space of health and wellness and fitness and nutrition. I just am always driven by that. It did reach another level though. I was starting to get an inkling around how can we do more than just better for you, right? I mean, lots of great products, supplements, food, nutrition, etc., that are better for you relative to many of the alternatives out there. But I felt like there's an opportunity to do more, like taking a more science-based, evidence-based approach to true functional food. Like it was building up in me. But the true inspiration for my why and why I decided to start this company actually is a personal story. Actually goes back to my sister, Monica, who struggled with their health throughout her adult life. So chronic metabolic syndrome. So she was clinically obese, did struggle with type 2 diabetes, hypertension as well. She tragically passed away far too young due to complications surrounding her health and a high-risk pregnancy. And that, as you can imagine, just shook me to my core. Like I'm a health and wellness executive, right? And my own sister, who I, would give shakes and diet programs and fitness, like nothing gave her power to change her trajectory. I was like, you know what? There should be a better way. To empower people with more control over their health. I wish Monica had better ways to gain better control over your health, and it was that inspired me to start this company from scratch, a little bit later in my life and career than your typical entrepreneur. Really is an homage to honor my sister's legacy, right? How could we create true functional food as medicine, tap into some of this science around making it more accessible, more functional, and frankly, more enjoyable to make healthier decisions. And I, wanted to do it from the angle that I love the most, which is nutrition, right? And so that was the spirit and the essence behind the why for Super Gut. And, and that's translated into now like honoring her legacy and empowering others. And it's just been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my life, is to actually see things come full circle, where we'll have, customers who have been struggling, right, with their health, that we've helped get into a healthier habit, consuming our products, our shakes or our bars or our fiber mix, that have literally made a step change in their health and feel like they're in control, for the first time in years. And some of whom have actually heard my story that I've been, outspoken about, and have actually, paid homage to Monica, and the light that still shines, right, by helping other people, is something that really gets me going when I see that.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
And
I'm sorry to hear that, but it's what a beautiful tribute you can give to your family in honor
Yeah,
of your sister. Really,
thank you so much, Karen. I
yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Go ahead. Dr. Damon?
Oh, at 100%. And, it's impossible to come in the wake of Mark and Monica's story. It's really moving to the core. And truly, it was, Mark's light and sort of Monica's light that that drew me to the company. It's just so clear, Mark's heart was in the right place. And my own story is I was working at the foundation, the Gates Foundation, working in the context of women and children in low and middle income countries, sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia. And we were working on malnutrition, stunting and wasting, and the double burden of disease became so apparent, where truly obesity, diabetes is just as prevalent as wasting and stunting in parts of the world that we're working. And it became so clear that we were really just replacing one disease with another.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt super compelled that this is a problem that needs to be short-circuited. And it's a problem that we can short-circuit right here at home and needs to be short-circuited here at home. It was around that time that I met Mark. And Mark was saying, well, we've got this really cool product and we want to put it to the test. We want to do a randomized placebo-controlled trial. And those are words that I speak. I was like, oh, really? Like, I'm a physician. I know those words.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. I saw Mark as really being a guiding light for food in general. Kind of leading the charge as a precedent. And so it was with that inspiration that I took the somewhat unusual and unlikely step from philanthropy and academia. And I feel like I'm at the core an academic. I still am a University of Washington professor. I still see patients. But it was Mark's ethos and that guiding light and that realization that the double burden was real that inspired me to find a way to short circuit disease. And whole food is part of it wholeheartedly.
For sure.
But it was so clear too that we're missing the mark and just saying whole food over and over again. Nothing's happening. And there are technologies that can help us reinforce whole foods, and we should continue to do that, like smartphones and apps and stuff. But I truly see these next generation functional foods, the better for you foods, the ones that reintroduce the things that have been taken out, as a really powerful complement to that. And so that's my why. That's why, I am passionate, as passionate as Mark, around this mission. So, yeah.
Well, I love a mission-driven company, and this is certainly one of them. So where can people find your products?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, currently, we're all direct to consumer. So the place to check us out is on our website. It's supergut.com. And obviously you can learn more about Supergut and the products that we sell, our shakes, our bars, our fiber mix, all literally packed with this diverse blend of these fibers that are going to feed your gut, for better overall health. We're also very active on our social channels as well. We try to provide, what we call smart but engaging gut health content, right? People are fascinated about this subject, and people, need to learn more, right, about just how important your gut is for total health. And so we're very active, at Supergut, right, on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter as well. And Karen, just for your listeners, we actually do have a special promotion that, if you don't mind me sharing.
Absolutely.
So for folks that do come to our site to check us out at supergut.com, we have our best offer, a 20% discount offer using promo code Karen. So come check us out. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And before we wrap things up, what are some key takeaways you want the listeners to come away with from our conversation today? And I'll let you both give your key takeaways.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, it's kind of like a summary of this, the interconnectedness between mind, body, and with at the center of it, your gut. I mean, so think about it that way. Like, this is all connected in so many different ways. And obviously, if you're not taking care of that foundation, it's easy for one or multiple of these different avenues to be off kilter. And so that's just kind of one of these. And obviously that ties back to the whole nutrition and the fiber and discussion that we had before. But that's the main point that I would take, is that it's all interconnected. I think you, and I assume most of your listeners, are quite aware between that mind body connection in the different spaces. But just know that at the center of it really is your gut microbiome, as that foundation for health that you really have to make sure you're taking care of in order to make sure that you're taking care of all the other dimensions of health.
Perfect. Dr. Damon?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the way I might answer that is to say, I think the medical establishment sometimes makes us feel a little crazy. And it means well, but nonetheless, maybe to apologize on the part of physicians and providers, and take some responsibility for that. And I put a lot of stock in what people tell me. Like, it's real. There's no doubt about it. And so listen to your body. And don't let other people tell you different. If this is something you're feeling, then it's real and it deserves attention. So that's first and foremost. And then I think food can be so powerful, and there's so much that we have to learn, and a lot of it is very personal. Personalization to food. So again, it comes back to listen to your body, but food is a really important and powerful piece to promoting health and to healing. Certainly not the only thing. I could give you some more acronyms, maybe another podcast for the whole approach to
Don't
health.
get them going.
But we'll save that for another time. Yeah. But lastly is just thank you. Thank you for listening and being an audience, because, and actually, Karen, to you, for taking the time to ask really good questions, because it's through forums like these that really important messages can get out to people, and that change can happen.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for coming on. And last question, it's one I ask every guest on my podcast, and that's, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self? So whoever wants to tackle it first, go ahead.
I'll start. So I would have two things that come to mind. One is sort of professional, one's personal. First one, professional, is to not get so caught up in thinking that life is linear. I've learned through life experiences that it can't all be predefined, that you don't just do, it's not formulaic, right? And that it's not a straight line kind of throughout your life, throughout your career. And so be open to new opportunities, because that's really where the development, the learning really happens, which are not quite on the predefined slope of which you might have in store in your mind. So be open to things that go off of that path is one. And then the second thing I would say is, make sure you have courage to go talk to that beautiful woman that you see across the dance floor, because she will change your life in so many ways for the better. And that was a little bit after I was 20. So I would, I'd have to make sure to make sure 20-year-old me was ready to not be too shy to go talk to that pretty girl. And don't be afraid of rejection, but just go do it. And trust me, you'll thank me later.
Nice. I love it. Go ahead, Dr. Damon.
So I'll say that's great advice. And I've met that pretty girl on the other side of the dance floor, and she's pretty incredible. So yeah, listen to Mark. And similar, I've got my own story around my own pretty woman, in this case, on the other side of the hospital floor, who helped me through that first night of residency as a nurse. But the first thing that came to mind is wear sunscreen from that graduation
I'm
speech.
with you.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
So that's a good one. But the other bit of advice that I'll give is, find your passion and follow it. And if you follow your passion, things just tend to fall into place more often than not. I mean, it's certainly not a perfect path, but I found this weird passion around bugs back when I was, in training, and I've just followed that curiosity. Like, what are these bugs doing? How are they connected to disease? Is it more than just infection? What about all these chronic diseases? And that passion of mine, that curiosity of mine, has always led me to really interesting life stories, like this whole super gut story that's happened over the last 2 years. I wouldn't have met Mark otherwise in the absence of this. So yeah, I know it's easy to say find your passion. It's hard to find your passion. Like, that's the first step. The first step is finding it. But if you are so lucky as to find that passion, follow it, and don't let other people dissuade you from following it. No.
Well, gentlemen, great advice from the both of you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking all about gut health. And just for the listeners, one more time, it's supergut.com. Really easy, Supergut across social media. So thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having us, Karen.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Karen.
Pleasure. And everyone, all the listeners, have a great couple of days and stay healthy, wealthy, and smart.